Welcome back. It's now time for business, and for that we're joined by our business editor, William Edwards. Will, we can't get away from this fiscal cliff. We were looking earlier just at the effect on the markets, but it's not completely doing well for all of them.
Well, it did have a good effect on US markets yesterday, with the Dow Jones having its strongest open for any year ever. But the magic seems to have rubbed off slightly. Let's take a look at how European markets are opening at the moment, and they are broadly down across the board. In fact, as you can, those figures I can tell you are not correct unless things are. I'm sorry about that.
They have been changed.
Technical error, but down by between 0.2 and 0.3% on open, at least. I should note as well, Spain unemployment down in December, still at 4.85 million, of course, over 25%, but still maybe turning a corner there. Let's take a look at how things have closed in Asia as well. The Hang Seng on Wednesday in Hong Kong ended at its highest since June 2011, and it extended gains in the recent session. You can see, though, session ended mixed in the end, with the Kospi ending down nearly 0.6%.
And now the IMF's reaction has been lukewarm, really.
Yeah, well, like the markets over in Asia, perhaps, the thing is, the deal with which was made yesterday was made on taxes, tax rises and spending. But spending cuts, there's been no agreement there. That's been pushed down the road 2 months. And also, Congress will have to agree in a couple of months as well to give the federal government more permission to borrow more. Which will also create another fight in Congress. The IMF says more remains to be done to put the US public finances back on a sustainable path.
Now, one thing that has been battling today has been the fiscal cliff fallout, that the delay on the Hurricane Sandy aid, and John Boehner is in for it, really, certainly with that delay. He's
got into quite a bit of hot water following that vote on the fiscal cliff. The leader of the House of Representatives, like you say, John Boehner, he decided to postpone a vote on $60 billion worth of aid for victims of Hurricane Sandy. And that could have meant that would have been delayed until at least next month. Now a vote is scheduled in this month, January the 15th, but that hasn't stopped members of Boehner's own party from criticising him, blaming him and the Republican Party as a whole. Chris Christie is the governor of New Jersey. He himself is a Republican. Let's hear what he has to say about his own party.
There's only one group to blame for the continued suffering of these innocent victims: the House majority and their Speaker, John Boehner. Last night, the House of Representatives failed that most basic test of public service, and they did so with callous indifference to the suffering of the people of my state.
Now, next to Europe, where the battle is on to become Italy's next Prime Minister, and it's an election that's likely to focus on the economy. Mario Monti has launched a bid for a second term, having originally promised to step down, while former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is campaigning against Monti's austerity agenda.
After his U-turn on deciding to run, Mario Monti launches his election campaign, and he warns the economic stakes for Italy are too high to be ignored. Speaking on Italian radio Wednesday, Monti said his government's austerity measures had brought the country back from the brink.
We had to do this without too much regard to reduce the government deficit by implementing spending cuts and raising taxes in the short term. We did this, and we can't continue with it. However, had we not taken these measures, we would not today be talking about growth in Italy. We would be like Greece.
The former EU Commissioner also said his technocratic government was forging ahead in the face of opposition from both wings of Italian politics.
The left-right divide is much less important than the divide between those who want to change the country with reforms and by working in synergy with Europe, and those on both the left and the right who oppose the change for their own reasons.
A nervous bond market forced Silvio Berlusconi to resign as Prime Minister 14 months ago. Now Berlusconi is back, and he says Monti is not a man of his word.
I have to say what he says is no longer credible. He was installed to lead a technical government, and he promised the president that he wouldn't profit from his role by entering politics. He promised me as outgoing Prime Minister, and he promised the Italian people.
Berlusconi has been making comments critical of both Germany and the EU in the past week, leading to a rise of 6% in the polls. Should he be elected, Brussels may find itself dealing with a less compliant Prime Minister than Mario Monti.
Now, next, we're going to look at the bit of a shake-up going on in the car rental industry in the States.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a shake-up in the last few years, really, in car rentals. Of course, the traditional way of doing it is you book the car by the day in blocks of 24 hours, and you go to the agency, pick it up, and return it to the same place.
And now you're saying there's a hassle-free way.
Well, it's become easier over recent years because there are companies that have allowed you to pick up a car pretty much anywhere. They park them on the street. You can rent them just by the hour if you need to, rather than by the day. The biggest of these companies, of course, is Zipcar. And old-fashioned rental companies are rather taking notice. In fact, they're now being bought by Avis Budget Group. Avis, of course, one of the biggest companies in the world for car rentals. They're paying $500 million for Zipcar. They're trying to get up to date with this sort of flexible way of renting cars. Of course, here in Paris, there are Autolib, they're known as, electric cars that anyone can get into, just hop into and drive as they want per hour. And also Hertz and other companies are starting their own similar competitors.
Realising the success of it, certainly. Well, let's look at the oil industry now. And there are concerns about Shell's drilling or plans to drill in the Arctic.
Yeah, Shell have already invested billions of dollars in exploration in the Arctic and hope to start drilling properly in July. But you can see here one of their test rigs has been exploring for oil in the last few months. It was being towed to Seattle for maintenance and, well, basically it broke away from the tugs and has now run aground. Now, salvage teams have inspected it. They say no oil has yet been released from this, but it is obviously a worry. Environmentalists say that this is an issue that could recur again in the harsh conditions of the Arctic.
And now, moving on, this week, new figures released showing 2012 was the worst year for French car sales since the mid-90s. And the country's manufacturers are suffering. But in Germany and other countries, car makers are still making big profits. Oliver Farry has been looking at what they're doing right.
It has been a punishing year for France's auto industry, one it is struggling to get over. Sales of new cars in France tumbled by 13.9% in 2011. But the big problem is it's not confined to the domestic market. French car builders are also feeling the pinch abroad. But constructors in other countries are faring much better. German, Japanese and Korean manufacturers have all seen a rise in sales, as much as 42% for Hyundai. The reasons behind that success are decisions that have clearly paid off. The more successful constructors have focused on either lower-end markets or luxury models. France looks to have been left behind, particularly in emerging markets, unlike German car builders. In the 1980s, the Germans were the first to sell, but also to produce in China. A far-sighted move that is now paying dividends as China becomes the world's #1 car market. Today, more than 1 car in 5 sold in China is German. And Chinese consumers are also buying top-of-the-range models. The Chinese market's rude health has allowed Germany to compensate for flagging sales in Europe. Domestic sales figures in November showed a 3% drop on the previous year. Germany has also implemented industrial strategies to allow greater flexibility in production, which in turn has helped it to meet foreign demand.
Finally, you're going to tell us why a US town has banned or moved to ban bottled water.
Yes, Concord, Massachusetts says small bottles of water are wasteful and encourage a throwaway culture. You're only going to be able to buy bottles of 1 litre or larger. In fact, the Australian town of Bundanoon, in fact, has already introduced a complete ban on bottled water in 2009, saying it's unenvironmentally friendly. You should just use refillable bottles and use tap water. And they hope that this will move people towards doing this.
Certainly an environmental friendly scheme. Will, thanks for the business update. Do stay tuned. Louise Hannah will be up with headlines in just a few minutes.